Hi there and welcome back to another episode of Sitting in a Car. I'm Sarah Sproul and I sit in a car and answer parents' questions about sex. We are here to raise confident and caring young people who respect themselves and the people around them. So the question this week is, if a child asks a question but you feel it's age inappropriate, how do you answer? Great question, because if you have a child that asks you questions, this is going to be super relevant for you. If you have a child that doesn't ask questions, have a listen in anyway, because you may have another child that is a questioner. The other thing to say is, if your child hasn't asked you a question yet, that doesn't mean they won't, particularly as you start sending out signals that conversations about sex and relationships and consent and all the things are fine. They may be starting to open up and ask you questions. So if a child asks you a question and you don't think they're the right age to answer, here's what you do. First thing is you ask them, you say, "That's a really great question. I'm glad you asked me." Because remember, we're in the business of creating connection between a parent and a kid. And you then ask them, what do you know about that already? Or what have you heard about that so far? Either of those two questions works well. And then you listen. And your child might say, like, nothing. I just heard the word on the radio, or I just heard this word in the playground, or I heard about something about it on YouTube, or they might tell you where the question is coming from. And then you need to notice your reaction, because a lot of the advice to do with talking to kids about sex is to be age appropriate. And when I use my fingers here and I sort of use age appropriate in quotation marks, it's to let you know that when something is age appropriate, that doesn't mean that it's going to be the same for each kid, right? So if you have a kid with who is sort of very interested in the world and engaged in social media and plays games online and video chats online, that kid is probably going to have a lot of information or be aware of a lot of different stuff about the world. And so they may be functioning at a level of awareness that is quite high. If you have an only child, for example, and they don't spend much time online and their friends are firstborns or other only children, then that child is going to be probably less likely to come across concepts and ideas that you may not have talked about at home. If you have a child that hangs around or is friends with someone at school who is, say, the fourth or fifth child in a family, they have a lot of older siblings, that child is going to have a lot of information just because of the house they live in. And that's fair enough. Every child is going to have a different growing up experience, and so they're going to have different amount of information. So if your kid is close to a child like that, then your kid's age appropriate definition is going to be completely different. Do you get my meaning? So age appropriate isn't something where you just go, yeah, age appropriate equals 9 or age appropriate equals 6. Age appropriate is going to be completely different. And the kicker is, if your kid asks you a question, that's an age appropriate question because they've asked you at the age they are at. Okay, so once you realize that even an inappropriate question is actually appropriate, then you need to move on. And the third step would be to, if you don't know the answer to it, or if you just need time because it's really come out of left field, like they've asked you what a virgin is or what rape is, or something that's complicated, you need time, you buy yourself time. And this is what you say: I need to find out more information about that because I want to give you the accurate information or give you a good answer that's easy to understand. Or you can say, I need to get my head around the question so I can make sure that I answer it right, okay? And then give them a specific time you'll come back to them. So it could look like this. My kid asked me a question of what is a virgin, and I say, oh, where did you hear that word? Or what do you know about that already? And they'll tell me, and I'll say, okay, I'd love to talk to you about that. That's a really great question. I need to get a bit more information. So how about after dinner tonight, once we've cleaned up, I come back to you and I let you know what I know. And they'll say yes. Or you can say, tomorrow morning when we walk to school, I can tell you what I know. Whatever the next time is, that you're going to have access to that kid and you're going to be able to give them good quality one-on-one time, that is the time to choose. And you're doing this for two reasons. Firstly, so you can show them that you're reliable. If they ask you a question, you'll come back to them with it. The second point is some of us as parents work better on a deadline. I'm definitely one of those parents. You may be too. So by setting myself a deadline and going into negotiation with my kid, it's going to make me do the work that I need to do for them. Okay, so that's the third point. The fourth point is keep in mind that Sitting in a Car is a podcast designed mainly for 8 to 12-year-olds, so parents of 8 to 12-year-olds. So if your child is 8 to 12, you can go to thetalk.ie and find a copy of, it's called, But What Do I Say? 59 age-appropriate conversations to have with your tween. I'll put a link to it in the comments below. Click on that link, download your copy of that, and it does what it says on the tin. There are 59 topics there that the World Health Organization say you could talk to a tween about. Now, some of them are going to blow your mind because you're going to think, how the heck does anyone talk to a tween about these complicated subjects? It doesn't mean you have to talk about those things. It's just sort of a guideline. All right, so that's a resource you could use. And there you have it. That is the answer to the original question, which was, if a child asks a question but you feel it's age inappropriate, how do you answer? So the points, let's revisit them again. You ask them what they already know and you reinforce it. Thank you very much for asking me the question. You notice your reaction to these things, and I gave you a little bit of information about appropriate versus inappropriate information and how to rethink that whole idea of age appropriate. You buy yourself time and you make a commitment to them that you will revisit the question and you will name a specific time that you will do that. And you download a copy of 59 age appropriate conversations to have with your tween about sex. And the link for that is below. And that's Sitting in a Car for another week, where I've answered a question from a parent about sex, so that we can all raise confident and caring young people who respect themselves and respect the people around them. Bye for now.